All right, ladies and gentlemen, week one is here, and you are probably looking at your bench players, looking at your flex spots, and thinking, how can I absolutely dominate my week one opponent and make sure that they are crying in a corner by the end of Sunday night? Well, I have got a few wide receivers that have week one winning upside that you absolutely need to start as we approach our first week of fantasy matchups. So let's break down each player and find out why they absolutely need to be in your starting lineups. All right, first up is Christian Watson playing on Friday night in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles, the secondary that allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers last year. If you own Christian Watson, you're probably a little bit hesitant for a few reasons. A, Christian Watson never seems like he's healthy, right? That's the risk that you take when you drafted him this year, but we all know that upside is so incredibly high. And then the other reason you might be worried is because, well, we got Jaden Reed, we got Romeo Dobbs and Tavion Wicks, we got some tight ends there. Now got Josh Jacobs on this offense. A lot of volume to go around, a lot of mouths to feed. But man, I'm telling you, this matchup is suited for a player like Christian Watson. The upside is way too much to leave on your table, especially if you are in a double flex format. He needs to be in your flex spots here in week one. I think he's going to have a massive performance against the Philadelphia Eagles. I expect points in this game from both the Eagles and the Packers. This is just a smash spot for Christian Watson. He's been healthy throughout the entire offseason, hasn't had any issues. He's going to be good to go Friday night. And yes, I like the other wide receivers for the Packers this week, but the upside lies with Christian Watson. If he's sitting on your bench, if you have some tough decisions when you're looking at those additional wide receivers, you can feel confident that Christian Watson is going to help you get a week one victory. Do not leave him on your bench. All right, next up, we've got DJ Moore going up against the Tennessee Titans, who notoriously have had a bad bottom 12 type secondary for the past couple of years. They've always been kind to opposing fantasy wide receivers, and we see a lot of rosters here on the channel. We see a lot of teams, and I've already seen some teams where people are asking about potentially sitting DJ Moore over players because they have a lot of depth at wide receiver, but DJ Moore in an absolute smash spot. I love this Bears offense this week. I think that stadium is going to be going crazy. Caleb Williams first start. Totally new offense this year, and DJ Moore against this Titans secondary when you've also got Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, a couple of tight ends, receiving back, and DeAndre Swift all lining up. They are going to find ways to get DJ Moore the ball. He's going to see the best volume out of any of these Bears wide receivers, and his touchdown upside in week one is super high. He should have an absolutely dominant performance in week one. I think he's a lock for double-digit fantasy points. Too good of a matchup to ignore. This offense in a great spot. Do not sit DJ Moore. He's an absolute must start with upside heading into week one. Next up is Jaylen Waddle going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Still a poor secondary overall. And once again, we see a lot of teams. We see a lot of rosters. I have already had people ask about potentially sitting Jaylen Waddle over other options. And really on a week in, week out basis, guys like DJ Moore, Jaylen Waddle are probably always going to be in your lineup, it seems. But like I said, we see a lot of teams, see a lot of rosters. But this is a matchup between the Dolphins and the Jaguars that I have starred for this week. This is one of my favorite matchups in all of fantasy football this week. I expect a lot of points in this matchup. I think both offenses are going to be slinging the football. I think Jaylen Waddle is going to see very good volume, even with Tyreek Hill, of course, on this team as the wide receiver one. I think he's a lock for close to double-digit overall targets and a lock for double-digit fantasy points in this game. And I think he has nice touchdown upside in this game, which he should progress in terms of what he did last year, which is 4 receiving touchdowns. Don't forget, Waddle was injured all year long, off and on last year. This year, he's fully healthy. He's good to go. I know we had some kind of concerning reports throughout the preseason, but that just seems to be the way it works with Miami Dolphins running backs and wide receivers, right? But Waddle's going to be good to go here in week one. Should see a lot of volume in a pass-heavy game, a high-scoring game. Don't leave Jaylen Waddle on the bench this week. I think he has a great amount of upside as we approach week one. All right, sticking with that same matchup, I want to talk about Christian Kirk going up against the Miami Dolphins, another bottom 12 unit last year against opposing wide receivers. And I think Christian Kirk, kind of had that injury pop up late in the preseason. You got kind of Brian Thomas Jr. buzzing there. So I think some people a little bit lower on Christian Kirk going into week 1. Maybe you got him as more of like a wide receiver 3 or 4 in your team. You might have someone else that you might be considering there in the flex. But I think Christian Kirk, a very solid flex option this week. Maybe not the most massive amount of upside, but just got to remember this is Trevor Lawrence's true and tried wide receiver 1, his favorite target, his security blanket, still averaged double-digit fantasy points last year and was still on an incredible pace before he got hurt last season. He's kind of the heartbeat of this Jacksonville Jaguars offense when he's healthy. I still expect Evan Ingram to get good volume. I think ETN is going to be involved on the ground. I do think Brian Thomas Jr. could have a nice week 1 as well, but I just want you guys to remember that Christian Kirk is the most consistent, most secure player that you can start in terms of wide receivers for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I love this matchup. I think both offenses going to be very good in this matchup. I think Christian Kirk is in line for a good week 1 performance and has nice touchdown upside. All right, next up is Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. If you guys watch the start sit video for wide receivers, I put Mike Evans in the must start category up there with guys like Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, because Mike Evans against this Washington Commanders secondary who allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers last year is not even fair. But I also love Chris Godwin this week against that same secondary. I think the Buccaneers overall at home in a smash spot in week 1. I think this offense is going to look very good. Don't forget Baker, still a top 10 quarterback in fantasy last year. I think overall, we're going to see points scored by the Buccaneers. I expect Washington to push back a little, kind of, ensure that the Buccaneers keep their foot on the gas, so to speak. But overall, whether you own Chris Godwin or you own Mike Evans, if you own Mike Evans, I mean, you're probably starting him anyways, but I just want to be sure you are not sitting Mike Evans this week no matter what. But if you do own Chris Godwin, you got him a little bit later in your drafts, he's a flex option for you, whatever. Chris Godwin should be in starting lineups this week. He is way too good to pass up. I love this Buccaneers offense at home this week. I love this matchup for both Evans and Godwin. Do not bench either of these players. The Washington Commanders might truly repeat as the worst secondary again in 2024. Way too much upside overall for both these wide receivers for them to be on your bench in week 1. All right, let's look at Sunday night's matchup. And I will say I love all the wide receivers in this Lions and Rams matchup. If you own either of the Rams wide receivers, they should be in your starting lineup. The Detroit Lions, very poor against opposing wide receivers last year, but so were the LA Rams. And they come in as a bottom 12 unit. And that's what we're looking for mainly in this video. And Jameson Williams, I think kind of just one of those players who you're probably looking at as a potential flex option and nothing more than that. Maybe he's sitting on your bench. If you want a pure upside play this week, Sunday Night Football, this matchup's always good between the Lions and the Rams. We got the Stafford Goff Bowl. I think we're going to see, both teams lighting it up. This is a indoor game, no weather to worry about. And I think Jameson Williams could absolutely go off. I've talked about him all preseason long, and now here in week 1, he gets a great matchup. He gets to prove why he's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Lions. The upside's huge here. Just remember, he had a really good chemistry with Goff towards the end of the season and through the playoffs, even scored twice in that NFC Championship game against the Niners. So I love him in this spot. It's a little risky. You might have better options. That's fine. But if you want to risk it for the biscuit, you want some week 1 true winning upside potential. I think Jameson Williams brings that to the table. I expect a big performance out of JMO in week 1. All right, last but not least, I want to talk about Tank Dell, who you probably drafted as maybe like a wide receiver 3 where he was going in ADP, but still a lot of people ended up with Tank Dell as a potential flex option, especially in single flex leagues. And he comes in with a little bit of a more stout matchup against the Colts on the road, who were 13th against opposing wide receivers last year. But at the same time, we know Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs are also going to be lining up on that field. Joe Mixon's going to be out there. Dalton Schultz going to be out there. There's no way CJ Stroud is not slinging the football around, and there's no way that this offense is not moving the football. But the point being is that when you have guys like Collins and Diggs lining up, who in the world is going to cover Tank Dell? He is the wide receiver this week for the Houston Texans who brings the most upside to the table. And don't forget, his chemistry with CJ Stroud is off the charts. We even saw that in the preseason. This is a player who can break for a huge play at any moment in the game. His upside is massive. I wouldn't even be surprised if Tank Dell has 2 touchdowns in this game. I mean, it's going to be such an interesting offense to watch this year. His upside is crazy in week 1. If you have him as a flex option, just leave him in. If you have to start him as your wide receiver 2, I don't even have an issue with that. I think Tank Dell absolutely smashes in week 1. He's a player who definitely brings week 1 potential winning upside. You cannot leave him on your bench as we move into the week. That'll do it for today's video. Let me know what wide receivers you guys are starting in week 1 down below. And while you're down there, if you have any fantasy football questions, starts, sits, trades, waivers, roster reviews, whatever it may be, drop them down there. I will get back to you guys as soon as I possibly can. If you did enjoy the content today, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Come join the Catch Fam community. And most importantly, get ready to absolutely dominate your week 1 opponents with those week 1 must start wide receivers. Don't leave those guys on your bench. Way too much upside. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.